Hey there, Paul Thorne here. Welcome to my fourth podcast, COVID-19 Surviving Isolation. Okay, so just to recap what I've spoken about in previous podcasts. The first was about fear. It was about how we can project into a future that hasn't happened yet. And the way to deal with that is to really check that we are in the moment, that we're not projecting. Because if your mind's anything like mine, you'll think of worst case scenarios. And actually, when we look at where we are right now in this moment, very often it's not as bad as we think it could potentially be. The second podcast was about routine. It was about having a structure for your day and how important that is. Make sure you get out of bed, make sure you get dressed, go to bed at a set time and try and keep your sleep pattern intact. It's really important. And the last podcast was about choices, and it was probably more philosophical than the other podcasts that I've done. It was very much a personal viewpoint, and that a choice is something that we consciously make, and also a choice for inaction is a choice in itself. But what this fourth podcast is about is it's actually about putting some action in. So the title of this podcast is CHRYSALIS. Now, I could make the metaphor of chrysalis and emerging a new person and everything else. I'm not going to insult your intelligence with that, but it's what I mean by it is it's a way of thinking of our time in self-isolation. What do I mean? Well, let me begin with what it doesn't mean. It means that we don't hide away or retreat. It means that we're open to possibilities there, and that we take steps to protect ourselves, not to expose ourselves to things or people that may harm us. It's really a time to be very, very kind to ourselves, to be good to ourselves. Now, I guess the government will tell us when the time is right to come out of self-isolation. But to be in chrysalis, it's your choice. It's a mindset that we choose whilst we're in this lockdown. For me, having made a conscious decision to do this, I found it a very nice place to be. During your time in chrysalis, you can use some tools to see better where you are now and possibilities for change in the future. They'll also help you to become more resilient, but the beauty of it is that we're making really good use of this time that we have now. The method that I've devised here is a very simple one. I've developed it over a few years, and I've applied it to myself whenever I've wanted to find direction and to take control really and make changes in my life. I think I've mentioned before that I'm a big fan of making lists. In fact, I've several notebooks in my bag right now, and it's a source of hilarity for some of my friends to see me pull one out mid-conversation and start to make a few notes. But these notebooks and other scribblings I carry around with me serve two roles. One is to provide a sort of roadmap for the near or not so distant future. And the second one, probably the most important one, is to externalize and make tangible what I'm thinking and feeling. It's a way of getting it out of my head, particularly in these times of lockdown when maybe if you're isolating on your own, or if the people that you're isolating with aren't the best people to speak to. This way of externalizing and making tangible of what you're thinking and feeling, I can't speak highly enough of it. Before we go into any depth, let's just understand some fundamentals and basics for the exercise that I'm about to describe. Okay, so here's a list of categories that anybody should be able to break their life down into. And they are health and self, relationships, home, work, and finances. I list all of these in order of importance to me at this particular moment in time. By this I mean areas of my life which need most attention. When I first started working with this method, it was difficult to put things into any priority order because everything seemed to be a pressing issue and needed work, and actually things were a bit of a mess. Certainly when I came out of the isolation room, it felt very, very overwhelming. I didn't know what to deal with first. I suggest you don't get too hung up on trying to get things in any exact order. It's okay to make mistakes. There's one exception, however. I think it makes sense to say that the most important aspect of anybody's life has to be their health. And it should always be at the top of the list, irrespective of what other areas in your life need attention. Must take priority. I find that most aspects of my life fall loosely into one of the categories that I've mentioned. Let me explain a little bit more briefly about what each category is about. Okay, so health and self. The health and self category covers a wide spectrum of things. The beauty of this category is it's very forgiving and it encapsulates many of the topics that are relevant to us. It doesn't only cover physical, mental and emotional health. It could also cover any potential addiction problems you have, self-esteem and self-worth issues, and the one that I really like best, being kind to ourselves and having fun. The next category, relationships, for myself and many other people, it's the next priority to health and self. It's the relationships that we have with others. Again, it's a broad category than it first appears because it includes every relationship that we have, be it good, bad, positive or negative, from ourselves to your partner if you have one, to the friends we keep, and those people, the kind of people I mean, those kind of people that we term as acquaintances, and certainly you'll know what I mean by those that we need to keep at arm's length for our own kind of preservation and self-esteem. The next category is home. Everybody needs to have a home. Wherever we live, it's probable that we can improve our immediate environment and our surroundings. So, obviously it's what the category is about. What needs to be done in your home? Are you behind with your housework? Maybe your room needs decorating. There are, however, issues at home that can be more complex. For example, living with an unbearable flatmate or having problems with the other people that we share our homes with. And this has got to be way more tricky than keeping up with the housework or painting a wall, However, it's still a home issue. So this is a category that kind of thing would go into. The next category is work. Now, the work category isn't exclusive to paid employment, and I acknowledge that not everybody's going to be in full or part-time employment. And actually, some of you may be already of retirement age, others of you will not have to work in the conventional sense. But this particular category, like others, is also very broad. It can include any voluntary work you do, education, study, setting up a small business, or actively making plans to get back into employment again. Obviously, in this time of COVID-19, some of you would have lost your jobs, so this is going to be a priority for you once lockdown is lifted. But, maybe this is a good time to think about what you would really like to do. This category really does apply to everybody, irrespective of whether they're in some kind of employment or not. We can all work towards a goal. The last category I mentioned was finances. Now, if you've got no financial issues, I'll try not to envy you. But like so many others, finances category is one that I've struggled the most with over time. I've never been very good with money. I'm stupidly generous, and sometimes I accidentally give away what I need. I seem to have a problem of understanding the value of money and the role that it plays in my life. I seem to be forever paying bills, and some time ago I was coping with a lot of debt. So this category covers which bills need to be paid first, your debt repayments, savings if you have any, and at the very least, if I don't manage to pay my bills in any given month, I do have a realistic idea of where I am financially. And although at times this has been difficult to acknowledge and something that I would prefer to ignore, it's in the spirit of responsibility and being in control. I'm not doing it for my creditors, I'm doing it for me. So there's a brief definition of each of the categories that I mentioned. Now, I understand that no two people are the same, so each of these categories is going to mean different things to different people. I appreciate that. I'm going to be talking about 3 different exercises that you can do. The first exercise is to carry a review out of your life, to understand where you are now and in this moment. The way we should carry out the review of our life needs to be very different and a completely opposite approach to choosing what we want to work towards in the second exercise, where we'll be looking at what choices are available to us and how we'd like things to be. So there are 2 very different mindsets and ways of looking at things, and we need to employ these in both exercises. So let me explain. When we're reviewing our life, finding out where we are now, we need to look at things from an adult or parental perspective. Now, we need to be fearlessly honest, but always kind to ourselves. This process of reviewing our life is not to be confused with a stick to beat ourselves with, even if that's our past experience of other adults and what we've done to ourselves before. So let me explain from a writing perspective. When I'm writing, there's a methodology that I use which is very similar. So when I'm getting ideas down on paper, I look at it through the eyes of a child and with wonderment and possibility, and I ignore that voice in my head, that adult voice, that critical voice that says, oh, you've spelt that wrong, or that doesn't make sense, or you're crap, you can't write. I put that mindset completely to one side. Now, it's not that that mindset is destructive. It is useful, but in a different context. So it's the more critical voice, but when I say critical, I don't mean that in a harsh or harmful way. It's in the same way as a teacher, if you like, would mark a pupil's work. So that's a mindset I want you to use, a kind of adult teacher kind of mindset. And personally, how I do this is I kind of almost think of myself in the third person, and I'm a big fan of stationery, as you've probably gathered already. I like my lists, and I usually use A5 notebooks for this, and I just keep adding to it. I also go through times where I shred all of these notebooks as well, because I really wouldn't want anybody to find them. But I go through the headings that I gave you, the categories, and I write about exactly where am I now. I do this in a really honest way, and I don't write about what I haven't got. I write about what I have got and what is available to me. Okay, so give that a go. Once you've done that, then it's time to start looking at the choices exercise and how we'd like our life to be. This is when you employ the childlike mindset, so not the critical teacher, parental kind of adult, but we get a bit more creative about how we would like our life to be. When we look at it with the eyes and wonderment of a child. Now, a word of warning, it's really important that these two viewpoints or mindsets never get to meet, so we keep them completely separate. And by that I mean, when we're reviewing our life, whilst we're being kind to ourselves, any hurt or sadness or disappointment, that child part of us. Now, it's very important that these two viewpoints or mindsets never get to meet. And by that I mean, when we're doing the life review, whilst being very kind to ourselves, we are looking at it maybe in a more critical way. Any hurt or sadness or disappointment that child part of us feels, must not play any role in that. And likewise, when we are looking at the choices, the potential for any change that we can create, the more critical viewpoint of the adult or parent mustn't come into it whatsoever. So it's two different ways of looking at things, and basically don't let the two mindsets meet. You need to look at one thing in one way and one thing in the other. So the review in your life is the more parental, and the choices side is coming from the perspective maybe of a child. Okay, so once you've done that, I recommend taking a break or two from the review of your life and the choices exercise. Let things settle a bit. You might actually want to add some things to the lists if anything comes up for you. Kind of sit with the feelings. Now, the third exercise I want you to think about is gratitude. Gratitude's really important, and for me it's an absolute lifesaver. I want you to write a separate list. Again, you can do this in the same notebook if you have one, of things that you could be grateful for. Even if you don't feel grateful, write them down. Start each item that you can be grateful for with the prefix I have or I am. For example, I have my health, or I have a job, or I am going on holiday soon. Get right down to even the simplest things that you could be grateful for, even though you may not feel it right now. For example, I have my eyesight, I'm able to walk, I have a roof over my head. Obviously, if you have a disability, then there are going to be other things in your life that you can be grateful for as well. Get them down on paper. Now, first you may find it difficult to think of the things that you can be grateful for. And I remind you, it's an exercise, it's not an exam. It's about really going through the motions, and try setting yourself a target, for example, 10 or 20 things that you could be grateful for. And by, increase it 5 times every time you write a gratitude list. Let me tell you, it's important for the exercise that you don't just add to an old list. You need to write it every time from scratch. It's, again, by externalizing the things that you think you could be grateful for on paper, trust me, you will eventually start to feel grateful for them. It's really a type of brain training, so I recommend that you do it on a regular basis for the best effect. I personally go through periods of time, sometimes weeks at a time, where I'm writing a gratitude list every day, and I can say that I really enjoy writing them now. Because if you keep doing this, even if it feels very mechanical at first, in time you will start to feel gratitude for the good things that you have in your life. This is about recognizing what you have in your life, because we take so much for granted. This time in lockdown, it's a great time to do it. Keep doing the gratitude exercise until you really start feeling gratitude. It doesn't have to be an overwhelming feeling of gratitude, but the green shoots of feeling them, it happens quicker for some people than for others. So, we've looked at the exercise of reviewing our lives. We've looked at exploring the potential choices that are out there for you, how you might like things to be, and we've looked at that from the perspective of a child. And we've taken time to recognise the good things in our lives and to have some gratitude for them. And it's a really good way of understanding where we are in the current moment. So now you've done these exercises, you have something tangible for the future to work with on paper. And you've externalized this stuff, you've taken notice of it, you've recognized it, you've acknowledged it. And this gives us a better understanding of where we're going, if you like, a roadmap. The question is, are you going to make the choice for change? Life isn't so much about what has happened or finding out who we were. It's about now. It's about who we can become. If you're interested in finding out more about my personal story, you may be interested in my book, Diary of a Modern Consumptive. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please ensure to subscribe. It makes a big difference to me.